It was the week before Christmas, and I was folding clean tablecloths for the big dinner when a message flashed on my phone. My daughter-in-law announced that her entire family, 25 people, would come over and enjoy the holidays at our place. I looked at the list of names and imagined the noise, the mess, and the same old treatment where I cook and clean while they praise themselves. I stood at the sink, steady and calm, and made a different plan. If you're watching this, please like the video, subscribe, and stay till the end, because this year, the lesson cooked itself. My daughter-in-law called me on a Tuesday afternoon. I remember the exact moment because I had just sat down after sweeping the hallway and folding the towels. The phone rang, and I answered the way I always do with her. Polite, steady, and hoping the conversation would be short. Her voice came through sweet, almost rehearsed, the kind of tone people use when they've already made a decision and are only informing you after the fact. She said, "Mother, I just wanted to let you know that we are coming over for Christmas this year. And not just us, my parents, my brothers, my sisters, and their families too. We thought it would be nice to celebrate together. There will be about 25 of us." She didn't ask if I agreed. She didn't ask if I was available. She didn't even pause to hear if I was all right. She said it like she was placing an order over the phone, like this was my role in life, to host, to cook, to give space, to be grateful for company I did not ask for. I held the phone to my ear, silent, letting her talk. She continued as if reading off a list. They would arrive on the 23rd. They would stay a few days. They would be bringing holiday cheer, which I knew meant noise, demands, cold coffee cups left everywhere, crumbs on every surface, and a house that would take a week to recover from. I could already picture the scene, not because I was guessing, but because I had lived this every holiday for years. They arrive with empty hands and full voices. I do the shopping, I do the cooking, I do the planning. Someone asks where the napkins are, even though the napkins have been in the same drawer for 10 years. Someone asks where the salt is while standing directly in front of it. Someone always spills something on the tablecloth and says, "Oh well, these things happen," as though I have not already washed that same cloth 100 times before, and when the night ends, I am the one standing in the kitchen, up to my elbows in soap and pans, long after the laughter has faded and the house has fallen quiet. My daughter-in-law has never hosted, not once. She likes to entertain when everything is already prepared. She likes to smile for photos with a plate of food someone else made and then post online how beautiful our holiday is. It is a performance for her, a stage, and my home is the stage she uses. So when she said, "We'll bring some chips or maybe dessert," I just listened. Chips, 25 people, and she thought a bag of chips and maybe a store cake would match the work of roasting, baking, seasoning, cleaning, preparing, and running a household for days. She had convinced herself that showing up was a contribution, that being present was enough. I could hear laughter in the background on her end of the call. People talking, relaxing, planning a holiday they expected someone else to make magical for them. And that someone was me. Again. I didn't interrupt. I let her finish everything she needed to say. She talked about sleeping arrangements like it was already decided. She talked about moving furniture around, using my living room for sleeping bags, putting someone in my sewing room, another person in my den. She even said the words, "Mother, you don't mind, right? You always manage. I always manage." That was the sentence that stuck with me, the sentence that hung in the air long after the call ended. They assume I will handle everything because I always have. They assume I will not say no because I never have. They assume that love means service without rest, without acknowledgement, without thanks. I sat there for a while after the call. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. I felt something quieter, something very firm. I felt the moment I stopped being willing to be taken for granted. And it didn't come with shouting. It didn't come with tears. It came with a very calm realization. If you don't draw a line for yourself, people will keep taking until there is nothing left of you. I didn't tell her no. I didn't argue. I didn't try to explain or justify myself. I simply decided that this Christmas would be different. I decided that in my own home, I would choose rest. I would choose peace. I would choose to show my family, not through words they won't hear, but through actions they can't ignore, that love is not a duty, and a mother is not a servant. I hung up the phone, folded the towel I had left on the armchair, and sat quietly. The house was still. My decision was already made. Before all of this, holidays used to mean something different in my house. When my children were small, Christmas was simple. I baked what I could afford, usually one chicken instead of a turkey, and I stretched the potatoes to feed all of us. The gifts were small: socks, a toy car, a knitted scarf, but the laughter was real. We didn't have much, but we had enough. I would stay up late at night, hemming curtains or sewing patches on their school clothes, and I remember thinking that someday they would grow up and remember these small acts of care. As the boys became adults, Christmas changed. They had jobs, families, homes of their own. I thought that meant we would share the work, the cost, the planning. But somewhere along the way, the responsibility stayed with me. I became the default host, not because I volunteered, but because it was expected. Every year they came to my home. Every year I prepared everything. And every year they left without noticing how tired I was. My daughter-in-law entered the picture after my son married her. In the beginning, she was polite, even warm. She called me mom and asked for recipes. But as time passed, her tone shifted. She began to treat my home like a hotel that happened to be free. When her family visited, they behaved the same way. They would arrive talking loudly, dropping coats on chairs, shoes kicked off at the door. People would call out, "What's for dinner?" before they even greeted me properly. I never complained. I told myself, it's family. This is what mothers do. But looking back now, I realized the difference between being included and being used. I wasn't being loved. I was being relied upon. There is a big difference. For years, I scrubbed the kitchen floors the night before holidays. I set the table carefully. I got up before the sun to start the cooking. I tried to make everything perfect so no one would feel unwelcome. I believed that hosting was my way of holding the family together, especially after my husband passed. I thought that if I stopped trying, everything might fall apart. But the problem with always being the one who gives is that people forget you have limits. They begin to see your effort as a norm, not a gift. And norms are rarely thanked. The first Christmas after my husband died, I remember standing in the kitchen, carving the roast, hearing laughter in the living room. Everyone assumed I was fine because the food was good and the house was clean. No one saw me go into the pantry to cry. They didn't notice I wasn't eating, only serving. I told myself it was grief. I told myself time would fix it. But the truth is, patterns don't change unless we change them. Over time, my daughter-in-law's relatives started coming every year too. At first, just 2 or 3, then 5, then 10, and eventually her entire family circle. Not one time did someone ask, "Do you need help?" Not once did anyone say, "Let us bring the food this year." They assumed I had the space, the money, the strength, and I kept proving them right because I didn't say no. There is a strange thing that happens when you do everything quietly. People think the work is small. They think it comes easy to you. They think you don't get tired. But I did. I got tired. Not just in my back or my hands. I got tired in my heart. I began to notice that after everyone left, the house didn't feel full. It felt used. Chairs pushed back from the table, crumbs under the plates, wrapping paper stuffed into trash bags, dishes piled in the sink. The laughter from earlier didn't echo warmly through the rooms. It vanished the second the door closed behind them. That is when I realized something very simple. A home is not warm because people show up. It is warm when love is shared, not expected. All these years, I thought I was protecting family tradition, but I was only protecting other people's comfort. Mine didn't matter to them, and it was not their job to notice. It was my job to stop allowing it. So when my daughter-in-law called and announced 25 guests, I did not feel shock. I felt clarity. For years, I had given them Christ. This year, I would give myself peace. The night she told me her 25 relatives were coming, I sat at my kitchen table without speaking. I looked around the house, the same house I had cleaned for years, decorated for holidays, filled with meals and birthdays and memories. My hands were resting flat on the table. They did not shake. I did not cry. I just sat still and thought. For the first time in a long time, I asked myself a simple question. Why am I the one who has to host? And the answer came just as quietly. Because I never said I wouldn't. People treat you the way they see you, and my daughter-in-law saw me as a convenience, not as a person, not as a woman, not as someone who deserves rest, just someone who does. I remembered the Christmases of the last years. I remembered standing at the stove while everyone else laughed in the living room. I remembered the aching legs, the swollen fingers, the quiet sighs I kept to myself. I remembered how my son always said, "Come on, Mom, you love hosting." But loving family does not mean loving exhaustion. Loving your children does not mean belonging to their needs. Being needed is not the same as being respected. That night, I realized something important. I did not have to prove love by suffering for it. So I made a decision. Not emotional, not angry, just firm. This year, I would not cook for 25 strangers. This year, I would not mop floors and smile through pain. This year, I would not sit in a corner listening to chatter that never once asked how I was doing. This year, Christmas would be mine. I opened my laptop and typed slowly into the search bar, "Places to travel alone for Christmas." The idea made me smile, a small smile, but real. The kind that comes from a thought you know is finally yours. I found a small cottage rental with a view of water, nothing expensive, nothing fancy, just quiet, a place where I could wake up and hear my own thoughts instead of everyone else's. I booked it. Then I sat back and waited to feel guilt. But it didn't come. Instead, I felt light, like someone had taken a heavy coat off my shoulders. Because the truth is, I had been waiting for someone to give me permission to rest, but no one was going to give it. So I gave it to myself. The next day, I didn't call my son. I didn't explain. I didn't justify. Women my age have spent our lives explaining ourselves, justifying every choice, every boundary, every tired sigh. I didn't owe an explanation. When Christmas Eve came, I cleaned the house one last time. Not for them, for me. I left the kitchen tidy, the guest bedroom ready, the pantry stocked. I even placed an extra set of clean towels on the table, neatly folded. Then I wrote a simple note and left it right in the center of the dining room. "Merry Christmas. The house is ready. So is the responsibility. Mom." No anger, no guilt, just the truth. I packed my suitcase, only what I needed. Comfortable clothes, my warm sweater, my medications, my tea bags, and the book I had been trying to read for 3 years but never found time for. While I zipped the suitcase, I realized something. I had never packed to go somewhere alone before. Not once in my entire life. I had always traveled for someone else, to visit family, attend weddings, help someone move, take care of someone sick. This time, I was going to take care of myself. The morning they were all expected to arrive, I made myself a small breakfast, sat by the window, and watched the driveway. When I saw the first car turn in, I didn't panic. I simply stood up, put on my coat, picked up my suitcase, and walked out the back door to the waiting cab I had scheduled the night before. No goodbye, no scene, no raised voice, just quiet freedom. As the cab pulled away, I didn't look back. I didn't have to. Because the life I was leaving behind wasn't my home, it was my habit, and habits can be changed. The day before Christmas Eve, I woke up earlier than usual, not because I had to, but because I chose to. The house was still, quiet in a way it rarely got. I stood in my kitchen and looked around. For the first time, I didn't feel dread at the thought of holiday work. I felt calm, because this time, I wasn't preparing to host them. I was preparing for me. I started with the house, but not the way I used to. I didn't polish every corner. I didn't stress over perfection. I cleaned only what mattered, the parts of the house that made me feel peaceful. I wiped down the counters, straightened the cushions, opened a few windows to let the air move. I lit one candle. Just one. Not the dozen I usually set out to make everything festive for everyone else. The house smelled like cinnamon. It smelled like mine. Then I moved to the kitchen. Normally by that point, I would be boiling water for gravy, basting meat, peeling potatoes, rushing between pots like a machine instead of a person. But today, I opened the fridge and took out only the groceries I wanted. I made a small casserole, something easy, something warm, something for me to come home to after my trip. As it baked, I stood by the stove and simply breathed, no timer yelling, no relatives calling, no lists running in my head, just me and the sound of my own thoughts, which had become strangers over the years. When the casserole cooled, I covered it, labeled it, and placed it neatly inside the refrigerator, a gift for my future self, a reminder that I mattered too. After that, I turned to the guest rooms. I made the beds, not perfectly, not like a hotel, but comfortably. I placed clean towels at the foot of each bed. I stocked toilet paper in the bathrooms. I didn't iron sheets. I didn't scrub floors until my back ached. I simply made sure the house was livable. They wanted the house. Let them have the work too. There was nothing wrong with preparation. There was only something wrong with sacrifice without respect. Next came the note. I sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where I had given, cried, prayed, and waited in silence more times than I could count. I took a plain sheet of paper, not a fancy card, not something meant to soften the blow. I wrote it the way I felt. Merry Christmas. The house is ready. The cooking, cleaning, and hosting are not. This year, I am taking time for myself. Mom, no apology, no explanation, just the truth. I placed the note right in the center of the dining table where they could not miss it. Then I gathered my things, not the things for the house, not decorations, not serving dishes, not holiday centerpieces. I gathered my things, a few clothes, comfortable shoes, my warm cardigan, my medication, my favorite tea bags, the book I had been meaning to read, things that were mine and mine alone. Packing that small suitcase took 10 minutes. Packing a life full of regret? That had taken years. I placed the suitcase by the door and sat in the living room for a while. The house seemed to breathe differently, not in anticipation, but in relief. I realized I had been living inside a space that always demanded something from me. Now, it finally felt like a home again, because I had taken back my own place in it. When evening came, I moved slowly, carefully, without fear. I'd forgotten something. I double-checked the doors, the lights, the stove, not because I was preparing for guests, but because I was preparing to leave without guilt. I called the cab company and confirmed the pickup time for the next morning. The driver said, "Ma'am, we'll be there exactly when you need." For once in my life, someone was doing something for me without expecting anything back. Before bed, I walked from room to room, not to tidy, not to fuss, just to say goodbye to the version of myself who lived there. The woman who always stayed quiet, always gave, always swallowed her own needs to keep peace. She had done her best, but she did not need to continue doing everything alone. I went to sleep early that night and slept deeply, deeper than I had in years. No anxiety, no dread, just rest. Because tomorrow I was leaving the house, but I was also leaving the role they had forced me into, and I wasn't coming back as the same woman. The next morning, I woke up before the alarm. The sky was still dark, the kind of darkness that makes a house feel like it's holding its breath. I moved slowly, not because I was unsure, but because for the first time in many years, there was no rush, no panic, no list of chores waiting the moment my feet touched the floor. I sat on the edge of the bed and listened, not for footsteps, demands, or doors slamming, but to the quiet. It was peaceful in a way I had forgotten was possible. I washed my face, brushed my hair, and put on the clothes I had laid out the night before. Comfortable, warm, and simple. There was no holiday apron, no special outfit for hosting, no makeup to hide exhaustion. I looked like myself. I recognized the woman in the mirror. That felt important. My suitcase was already by the door. I picked it up and rolled it across the hallway. The wheels made a soft sound against the floor. Not the sound of someone sneaking away, the sound of someone leaving on purpose. I walked into the kitchen. I didn't cook. I didn't prepare coffee for everyone else. I simply poured myself one cup, sat at the table, and drank it slowly. The note I had written sat right in front of me, exactly where I left it. The final word on the matter. I didn't need to add anything. I didn't need to soften it. I didn't need to explain myself. For once in my life, I was not defending my right to rest. The taxi pulled into the driveway a few minutes later. Headlights stretched across the wall, filling the kitchen with white light. I stood, pushed the chair in, took one last look around, and unlocked the front door. The air was cold when it hit my face, but it didn't bother me. It felt clean. It felt like a beginning. The driver stepped out and greeted me kindly. He saw the suitcase and opened the door for me. No judgment, no questions, just respect. I appreciated that more than he knew. As I settled into the back seat, I looked at the house, not with guilt, not with fear, and not with sadness. I looked at it with understanding. That house had held years of holidays, laughter, arguments, heartbreak, and love. But somewhere along the way, I had stopped living in it. I had started serving in it. And there is a difference. We pulled away before the first car arrived. My timing was intentional. I didn't want a dramatic scene. I didn't want shouting, crying, or explanations in the driveway. I didn't want my departure to be something they could twist into a story where I was dramatic or unreasonable. I wanted silence to speak for me. As we drove down the road, my phone began buzzing. First one message, then two, then a call. I didn't look. I didn't answer. I turned the phone face down on the seat beside me. I had spent years listening to everyone else's needs. This morning, I listened to mine. When we reached the bus station, I thanked the driver and walked inside. The building was quiet, just a few travelers waiting. I found a seat by the window and let myself breathe. I didn't think about the house. I didn't think about the cooking. I didn't think about whether they had figured out how to turn the oven on or where the forks were kept. I didn't think about the daughter-in-law rehearsing excuses or apologies. They would figure it out, or they wouldn't. Either way, it wasn't my responsibility anymore. The bus arrived on time. I boarded, placed my suitcase in the overhead rack, and sat by the window. As we pulled onto the highway, the sun began to rise. Warm light stretched across the sky in long, steady lines. It didn't feel symbolic or dramatic. It simply felt right. I didn't feel regret. I didn't feel guilt. I just felt free. For the first time in years, Christmas belonged to me. No pots boiling, no doorbells ringing, no raised voices, no forced smiles. Just me, in a seat, watching the road open ahead, wide, quiet, waiting. I didn't leave them to be cruel. I left because I finally understood something that took nearly a lifetime to learn. If you don't step away, they will never stop stepping over you. I didn't turn my phone back on until the next morning. I let it rest on the nightstand in the hotel room, quiet and still, while I drank my coffee slowly and opened the curtains to let the light in. The world continued just fine without me. I didn't feel needed. I didn't feel guilty. I felt steady. When I finally powered the phone on, it lit up like a siren. Dozens of messages, missed calls, voicemails, every one of them from home. The first message was from my daughter-in-law. "Where are you? Everyone is here already." Then, "We need you in the kitchen." Then, not long after, "Why didn't you prepare the food?" "The turkey is frozen." I didn't reply. I read every word slowly without feeling anything twist in my stomach. That was new for me. For years, their demands controlled my heart rate. Not anymore. The next voicemail was my son's voice. "Mom, where are you?" "They're all waiting. You didn't tell us you weren't cooking." He sounded confused, not concerned. There's a difference. I didn't call back. 2 hours later, my phone buzzed again. Not with words this time, but with chaos. She had added me to a group chat with her relatives. One message read, "Where are the pots?" Another, "The oven isn't turning on." Then a picture, the kitchen counters covered in raw ingredients, wrappers, and spilled gravy packet powder. Then came the complaints, "The house is too cold. There aren't enough blankets. The food isn't ready." The tone shifted from confused to irritated, then irritated to angry, then angry to panicked. It turns out when you take away the one person who quietly keeps everything running, the whole machine falls apart. My son tried to play mediator. He sent, "Mom, can you just tell us where things are?" I could have answered. I could have told him where the roasting pan was stored, how long the turkey needed, which cupboard had the seasonings. I could have saved them, but I didn't, because sometimes saving them is what keeps them from ever learning. Later that afternoon, the doorbell at my house rang non-stop, and my son sent a picture of my daughter-in-law crying on the couch while her relatives stood around looking annoyed. He wrote, "They're upset. They don't know what to do." I sat in the hotel lobby with a blanket over my lap and a warm cup of tea in my hands and stared at that message for a long time. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because I finally did. They didn't want me. They wanted my labor. My presence was only valued if it came with a serving spoon in my hand. By evening, the messages grew quieter. The complaints stopped. The demands stopped. Silence replaced them. Silence can be louder than shouting, and it teaches better too. Around 9 p.m., my son sent one more message. No attitude, no expectation, no command. "Mom, I didn't realize how much you do. I'm sorry. It wasn't long or dramatic, just honest." And that's all I had ever wanted. I didn't reply to that one either, not because I was angry, but because I wanted the lesson to settle. When someone learns something important, you have to let them sit with it. If you rush to comfort them, they forget it by morning. Meanwhile, I ate a simple dinner, nothing fancy, and watched the city lights from the hotel window. It struck me how peaceful a holiday could feel when you're not carrying everyone else's weight. I didn't need a feast. I didn't need a full house. I didn't need noise. I needed respect. And for the first time in years, I got it. By the time I turned off the lights and slid into bed, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. I was not tired, not drained, not worn down to the bone. I was rested. And that, to a woman who has given her whole life away in pieces, is worth more than any Christmas dinner. I came back 2 days later. I didn't tell them the time. I didn't warn anyone. I rolled my small suitcase through my own front door, and the first thing I noticed was the smell. Not the warm smell of a holiday home. No cinnamon, no ham, no bread rolls, no candles. Instead, the house smelled like burnt casserole and stress. It wasn't dirty exactly, but it was tired. The walls felt tired. The furniture looked tired. The people in it were exhausted too. My son was sitting at the kitchen table with his head in his hands. His shirt was wrinkled, like he had slept in it. The table was covered with used plates, mismatched cups, paper towels, and half-finished dishes. Someone had tried to bake something. I could tell by the flour dusted across the counter like snow that fell in all the wrong places. The sink was full. The dishwasher door hung open like it gave up halfway through living. My daughter-in-law was standing near the stove, hair tied back, face red, eyes dull. She wasn't angry. She was embarrassed. Someone had finally realized just how much work a holiday dinner is when the person who always handled it stops doing it. The relatives were gone. Not a single one stayed to help clean. The same people who showed up empty-handed left empty-hearted. That didn't surprise me. Family is easy to gather. Respect is hard to earn. My daughter-in-law forced a smile when she saw me. It didn't reach her eyes. "Mother, we didn't know it would be like this," she said. I knew she meant it, not as an apology, not as an excuse, just a plain truth spoken too late. I didn't rush to comfort her. I didn't rush to hug her. I didn't rush to say it was all right, because it wasn't all right, and pretending it was would erase the lesson. I looked at my son next. He stood and walked over slowly, like a child who scraped his knees and didn't know whether to cry or run. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. I saw the understanding written all over his face. "Mom," he said softly, "I didn't realize." Those 4 words were enough. I sat down at the kitchen table, my fingers brushed against a plate still smeared with gravy. I could almost hear every Christmas before this one, all the years I chopped, stirred, basted, cleaned, folded, smiled, and served while no one noticed the effort, while no one thought it was work, because mothers and grandmothers are expected to make things appear out of thin air. And just like that, the silence in the room changed. It was no longer the silence of resentment. It was the silence of recognition. My daughter-in-law exhaled as if she had been holding her breath for years. She pulled out a chair and sat across from me. "We took advantage of you," she said quietly, not whispered, not dramatic, just the truth. "I know," I said, "but now you understand. Understanding matters more than apology." My son ran a hand over his face and looked at the mess around us. "We tried, Mum. We really tried," he said. I nodded. Trying is how you learn. I didn't say I told you so. I didn't say you should have known. I didn't say you made me feel small. Those words changed nothing. But seeing the exhaustion on their faces changed everything. They finally saw me, not as the holiday machine, the default cook, the background worker, but as a person who had been quietly carrying the weight of the entire family for decades. That night, they cleaned the kitchen without asking me to join. They scrubbed the pans, washed the counters, folded the tablecloth, and threw away the ruined casserole without trying to fix it. My daughter-in-law came back into the room with something behind her back. Flowers, not expensive ones, not fancy, just a small bunch she picked herself from the small garden patch outside. "For you," she said. "Next year, we won't expect anything. We'll help." I took the flowers. They weren't perfect, but the respect behind them was. Respect lasts longer than resentment. I slept in my own bed that night, peacefully. No noise, no demands, no invisible load on my shoulders. For the first time in many Christmases, I felt like a guest in my own home instead of a servant in it. And that was victory enough. When I walked through my door, after those 2 quiet days away, it didn't feel like a dramatic entrance. There was no anger inside me, no need to raise my voice or demand explanations. I simply came home to see things exactly as they were. And sometimes, real change begins when you just stand still and look. The first thing I noticed was my dining table. That table had seen years of holidays, birthdays, anniversaries, arguments, celebrations, burned pies, late-night coffee talks, and early morning prayers. It had always been the heart of the house. Now, it was covered in the remains of a celebration that had no center. Plates still stacked, cups with coffee rings left behind, napkins rolled but not folded. The chairs were scattered, as if people had moved around without thinking. It wasn't dirty enough to shock me, but it wasn't cared for either. It looked like a room where no one knew whose job it was to fix things. I took off my coat, hung it on the back of the chair, and just stood there for a moment. My son was sitting at the end of the table. He didn't jump up. He didn't start explaining. He didn't rush to defend himself or his wife. He simply looked tired, the kind of tired that sits deep in your bones. The kind of tired that comes after realizing you've taken someone for granted and only now understand what that cost. My daughter-in-law walked in next. Her posture was different from before. Not proud, not bold, not pretending to be in charge of anything. Just humbled, a woman who had been given a glimpse into a world she didn't know existed. The world of never-ending, invisible work. She didn't try to hug me. She didn't cry. She didn't act like a victim. She just nodded at me, like someone acknowledging a truth finally understood. The kitchen told the rest of the story. They had tried. The counters had been wiped, but not well. The oven had crumbs burned into the bottom. The trash can was full, and the lid didn't close all the way. It wasn't pretty, but it was effort, and effort matters when respect is being rebuilt. I walked slowly through each room. The living room cushions were in the wrong places. The floor needed sweeping. The guest bedroom door was open, blankets half folded. They had tried to clean. They just didn't know how much work it truly takes to keep a home running. All those years, I did it so well they thought it was easy. That's the real trick of a woman's work. The better you do it, the more invisible it becomes. When I came back to the kitchen, my son finally spoke. Not long speeches, not excuses, just one sentence that told me everything. We couldn't do what you do. He said it quietly, steadily. No shame, just truth. And truth is enough. My daughter-in-law came closer, holding something behind her back. I thought for a moment she was hiding, but no, she was offering. Flowers. Not purchased, not fancy. Simple flowers from the small patch near the porch. A gesture, a recognition, a beginning. She placed them on the counter in front of me. No speeches, no dramatic apologies, just presence. And sometimes presence is the apology. I didn't ask them why they never helped before, because I knew the answer. They assumed I would always be there. Cooking, cleaning, hosting, smiling, covering, sacrificing. Mothers are the quiet backbone of family routines until the day we step away and the whole structure wobbles. That day, the wobbling finally made them see me, not as the background, not as the kitchen worker, not as the one who knows how to do things, but as a person whose effort had built every holiday they ever enjoyed. I put the flowers in a vase, not because I needed them, but because I accepted the meaning behind them. That night, I didn't clean their mess. I didn't fix what they couldn't finish. I didn't return to my old role. I sat at the table. My son made dinner. My daughter-in-law washed the dishes. They moved slower than I would have. They made mistakes. They dropped spoons. They oversalted the soup. But they worked. For the first time, they worked, and I let them. That was the real return. Not me walking into my house, but them finding their way back to appreciation. The quiet victory didn't happen in one moment. It didn't come with apologies shouted across the room or grand speeches about appreciation. It didn't come from tears or dramatic hugs. It came slowly, gently, like a door opening an inch at a time after being closed for years. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise the way I always did, not out of duty anymore. Just habit. I sat in the kitchen with my cup of tea, listening to the house breathe. The floor creaked in places I knew well. The refrigerator hummed. The air was calm. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I had to rush to prepare anything. I didn't touch the stove. I didn't take out pots. I didn't even think of cooking breakfast. I just sat, quiet and still, and let the silence sit with me. A little while later, my son came into the kitchen. He paused when he saw me sitting there. I could tell his old reflex was to wait, to let me get up and start the morning routine. But he didn't. Something in him had shifted. He walked to the cupboard, took out 2 bowls, the cereal, the milk. He did everything slowly, awkwardly, unsure, but willing. He set a bowl in front of me, not fancy, not perfect, but thoughtful. I didn't need him to say sorry. This was better than an apology. This was awareness. Later that day, my daughter-in-law began doing the laundry. I watched her struggle with the old washing machine that jams, unless you lift the lid just right and tap the side twice. She tried 3 times to get it going. Normally, I would have stepped in, showed her what to do, done it myself because it was easier. But I didn't move. I let her learn, because if I stepped in, I would be undoing everything they were trying to understand. And understanding is more valuable than speed. The house looked different too. Not cleaner, not yet, but shared. The chores were no longer mine alone. The responsibilities were no longer invisible. Every task now had a visible cost to someone's time and hands, and that changed the way they acted. My son stopped calling family gatherings easy. He stopped assuming things just happen. He stopped believing comfort grows out of thin air. He saw the work. And once someone sees the work, they can never unsee it. In the evenings, we began sitting together after dinner. No television, just talking, slow, real conversations that didn't need to go anywhere. My daughter-in-law asked questions about recipes, about family history, about how I kept the house so warm without making it feel heavy. These were things she never cared to ask before. She wasn't trying to win me over. She was trying to understand the foundation of a home, not the walls, not the furniture, but the small daily acts that make people feel loved. One afternoon, I found her in the garden trimming the hedges. No one asked her to. She did it because she had seen me do it for years, quietly, consistently, without announcing it. She looked up at me when she realized I was watching, unsure of my reaction. I simply nodded. Not approval, not praise, acknowledgement. That was enough for both of us. My quiet victory was not that I made a point, not that I left the house to prove something, not that I forced them to see their mistakes. My quiet victory was that they came to the realization themselves. No shouting, no punishment, no revenge, just absence. Sometimes, stepping away teaches louder than sacrificing yourself every day. My house returned to being a home, not because everything went back to how it was, but because everything changed. I no longer rushed to serve. I no longer bent to please, and they no longer expected me to. We became 3 adults sharing a space, not 1 servant and 2 guests. That is what respect looks like when it comes back. Not applause, not tears, but balance. And in that balance, I found something I didn't know I had lost, my sense of worth inside my own home. That was my quiet victory. A home is not built out of bricks, flooring, and decorated walls. A home is built out of respect. And respect is not something you beg for. It is something others learn to give when they finally understand what your presence has been holding together all along. After that Christmas, I realized something that took me nearly my whole life to learn. When you do everything for others, they forget you have been doing anything at all, because comfort makes people blind. My family had grown so accustomed to walking into a warm house, sitting at a table that was already set, eating food that had appeared as if from nowhere, resting in beds with clean sheets and folded laundry, that they didn't see the hands behind it. They didn't see the planning, the energy, the quiet thoughtfulness behind every choice. They saw the results, but not the work. And when work is invisible, the worker becomes invisible too. For years, I thought this was simply the way love was supposed to look: quiet, selfless, patient, forgiving. But love without balance becomes labor, and labor without appreciation becomes burden. And burden, when carried too long, becomes resentment, heavy enough to hollow a person out. I had been shrinking myself in my own home, not physically, but emotionally. There is a kind of silence women of my generation know very well. The silence of holding things together while everyone else gets to relax. But when I left on Christmas, when I chose myself for the first time, something in that silence broke. Not in anger, not in spite, but in peace. The peace of knowing I didn't have to exhaust myself to be valued. The peace of knowing I could rest and the world would not crumble. The peace of understanding that sometimes the lesson others need is simply absence, because absence clarifies everything. My son understood it when he had to slice vegetables with his cold hands because no one had thought to prepare anything earlier. My daughter-in-law understood it when she had to organize 25 people with no schedule, no plan, no warmth guiding the room. Their family understood it when the table felt empty, even though the chairs were full. They felt my absence, and only then did they see my presence. That is the lesson I want every woman who hears my story to take. You do not need to shout to be heard. You do not need to fight to be respected. You do not need to sacrifice yourself to be loved. Sometimes you simply need to step back so others learn how to step forward. Now, when I walk through my home, I do not rush. I do not carry every task alone. I no longer treat rest as something I have to earn. I sit in my chair by the window, sunlight on my hands, warm cup of tea beside me, and I let the day come to me slowly. And my family knows I am not the caretaker who never stops. I am not the background figure who exists only to serve. I am the woman who built this home, not the one who must maintain it alone. Respect did not return because I demanded it. It returned because I stopped giving away parts of myself for free. To you listening now, whether you are a mother, a grandmother, a wife, a sister, or a woman who has held too much for too long, I want you to hear this clearly. Your quiet labor is not small. Your love is not invisible. Your presence is the spine of your family. If they forget that, let them remember. Not with shouting, not with punishment, but with distance. Because sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do is simply stop. Stop overdoing. Stop overgiving. Stop proving. Stop explaining and let others finally learn what your absence really costs. Now, let me ask you something. If your family took your kindness for granted, if they expected your hands to work without pause, your patience to never run dry, your love to bend until it breaks, would you keep giving? Or would you just once book that trip, close that kitchen door, and let them learn what you have been carrying? Tell me in the comments below, and if you felt this story in your bones, please like the video, subscribe, and stay with me. There are more stories to tell, more lessons to share. You are not alone in this.